Good morning. I am Reverend Tom Capo, minister here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church, and I want to welcome our viewers on YouTube as well. Throughout today's service, I'll be talking about Paul Tillich and quoting him a fair amount. I want you to keep in mind that Tillich's quotes were reflective of his time. He used he when he was referencing God, man when he was referencing human. There are some language issues, and I chose not to change those so that I would quote him accurately this morning. Paul Tillich's father, his Prussian father, Johannes Tillich, was a conservative Lutheran pastor, and so Paul decided he too would become a Lutheran pastor, following in his father's footsteps. But after World War II, he went back to school and decided to become a theologian and to have more of an academic career. He served as a professor of theology in German and American colleges and universities, including Harvard and here in Chicago, the University of Chicago. Of his many works, his works called Systematic Theology, it's a 3-volume set, stand out. The books outlined his particular synthesis of Protestant Christian theology and existential philosophy. At the time of its publication, it was heralded by many theologians worldwide as a seminal work. In Systematic Theology, he writes, "Ordinary theism has made God a heavenly, completely perfect person who resides above the world and mankind. The protest of atheism against such a highest person is correct. There is no evidence for his existence, nor is he a matter of ultimate concern. God is not God without universal participation, and a personal God is a confusing symbol." Tillich also writes, "God is the name for that which man ultimately concerns himself. This does not mean that first there is a being called God and then the demand that man should be ultimately concerned about him. It means that whatever concerns a man ultimately becomes God for him." And finally, he wrote, "Theologians must make explicit what is implicit in religious thought and expression. And in order to do this, they must begin with the most abstract and completely unsymbolic statement which is possible, namely that God is being itself. However, after that is said, nothing else can be said about God which is not symbolic." His theology pushed Christianity to its limits. And many people thought it was too unorthodox to even qualify as Christianity, rather a form of pantheism or atheism. Today, I want to share with you a little bit about Tillich's book, The Courage to Be. It's inspired me and impacted me throughout my life, and as I continue to affirm myself despite all my own personal doubts and despite all that is happening around me. Okay, he's all ready. And so we're going to sing. So please join me and stand if you're willing or able, and we'll sing together, "Here We Are Gathered." It's hymn number 360 in the gray hymnal, and the words will be projected to your left.
quotes from Paul Tillich's book, The Courage to Be.
The courage to be is the courage to accept oneself in spite of being unacceptable.
Man creates what he is.
Theism, in all its forms, is transcended in the experience we call absolute faith. It is the accepting of the acceptance without somebody or something that accepts. It is the power of being itself that accepts and gives the courage to be.
Grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of a meaningless and empty life. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, and our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. It strikes us when, year after year, the longed-for perfection of life does not appear. When the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades. When despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, "You are accepted."
The courage to be is rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt. Please remain seated and let us join together in another hymn, Find a Stillness. Again, it's 352, and the words will be projected. Tillich's work, The Courage to Be, was published in 1952 and was read widely, including by people who don't normally read religious books. A lot of college students, for instance, in the 50s and 60s, had a copy of this book on their bookshelves, along with books like Walden by Henry David Thoreau, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, the book On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are by Alan Watts, and of course, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe. A diverse kind of section of books, wasn't it? Well, that's what the 60s were, a time of diverse ideas, turbulence, times of putting aside old ways of looking at the world and opening up to new, often radical ideas about existence, philosophy, psychology, and theology. 50-plus years ago, the courage to be not only appealed to liberal Christians, but it appealed to a broad spectrum of people across the United States, particularly spiritual seekers who are trying to find some kind of grounding in a time of unprecedented anxiety. And so I ask us this morning, and I ask you to think about, does this text have any relevance for Unitarian Universalists in the 21st century? And I hope to answer that question. Also, as we lit our chalice this morning, I ask us to reflect on our first and fourth principles. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Tillich's ideas at their foundation call us to affirm and promote the inherent worth of every person. And most importantly, he asks us to affirm and promote our own worth and dignity. As part of this self-affirmation process, we as rational beings search for new perspectives, willing to examine truths that may differ from the ones we came into this hall with this morning. Willing to consider different meanings that might help us manage the anxieties we experience as we live and move through life. So I invite you to let these principles float in the front of your mind as you consider Tillich's perspective on how we might live our lives in relative security, despite the many things we cannot control around us and within us, in spite of the doubts we may carry in our hearts, and in the face of the many things that might cause us anxiety. In his book, Tillich examines how we can effectively manage anxiety. And he explored the concepts of courage, being, acceptance, and affirmation as means of coping with life's many different types of anxieties. But he looked at anxiety first, and I want to share with you a little bit about how he saw anxiety. He considered there to be some universal anxieties that we all experience in one form or fashion. The first, and not surprisingly the most intensive of those anxieties, the ones that he gave most attention to, address the idea of us not being in control of our lives and the simple fact that one day we all will die. He called these anxieties fate and non-being. And his position is that one way or another, these anxieties affect all of us, impact our lives, impact our decision-making. In some way in our mind, we take them in consideration as we think about the outcome of our decisions. And for him, he'd say that we take into consideration every time we make a decision how it might more quickly lead to our demise or our non-being. I worry about things. I have anxieties about things, about my non-being, about things not being in control in my life. I wonder how I will survive financially until I die. I think many of us might. I worry about the nature of my death. Will it come quick and relatively painless, or a long, drawn-out, agonizingly painful death? My dad had Parkinson's. Is that part of my future as well? I ask myself, will I have time and ability to complete my bucket list? And finally, I try to live my life so I can leave behind a legacy of kindness after I die. So that the difference I've made in the world will live on beyond me. But will it? After I die, will any impact I've had simply die with me? I ponder these things, both concrete and existential, about fate, being and non-being. And I guess being in a room full of people who are Unitarian Universalists and self-aware seekers of knowledge, I'm probably not the only one to think about these kinds of questions. But I wonder, do you know how they affect your decisions? How they affect how you live and move through this life? According to Tillich, the second form of anxiety is guilt and condemnation. To a varying degree, we are all moral and ethical beings. Every day we make decisions informed by our morals and ethics, and many times we make decisions that are, in some form or fashion, unsatisfactory, not consistent with our personal morals and ethics. And when we do so, we damage our self-esteem and or hurt someone in our lives. They are decisions that we wished we hadn't made. When we do this, this can result in despair, causing us to feel guilty or condemn ourselves for that bad decision. One of the consequences, you could say, I guess, of being a minister is I think about morals and ethics all the time. Probably not all of you do. It's probably not on your mind all the time. For each decision I make, I gather the best information I can, consider my past experiences, and take an informed leap of faith, I think as we all do when we make a decision. I know I will never have all the data I need, and that my past experiences are not always the best indicator of the best decision. But I do my best and hope I don't hurt myself or others in the decisions that I make. You know, I've made countless decisions here at this church, many of them with positive results. Recently, I decided that the church could co-host an LGBTQ panel discussion for the Naperville community. I didn't think anything about it, because this church and other Unitarian Universalist church have done these kinds of things for many years. This decision was primarily based on my past experience. But I didn't consider something. I didn't consider the climate in which we presently live, a climate in which a person or people could attend a gathering here at this church in order to be violent or abusive, because they feel that we here don't represent their values and beliefs. I made the decision to okay the panel discussion based on my past experience, yes. But I didn't fully examine the situation. I went with my gut, even though there are people who yelled at members of our church as we marched in the Aurora Pride Parade, screaming that we were all going to hell. Even though last year people protested with abortion rights with graphic signs in front of our church during an activist expo. Even though every day I see on the news or on YouTube another example of an innocent person being verbally abused with racial slurs, and almost every week someone is beat up or shot for being black, brown, Muslim, Sikh, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, genderqueer. I'm going to talk to some other members of the church about this and realized my mistake. I felt guilty for making such a quick decision that could have had disastrous results. It didn't. It was a lovely evening. And I don't tell you this to say we need to stop hosting or supporting the LGBTQ community or to stop advocating for abortion rights or immigrant rights or a number of rights that are under assault right now. Hosting these events is the right thing to do. They're how we live our Unitarian Universalist principles and values. But I need to be, and we need to be, more aware of how to prepare for these events and the potential negatives of events like this. And just to let you know, a team of members of this church, the DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church Emergency Operations Planning Team, has developed new policies and procedures to protect this church. But they need heads up before the decision is made to host or co-host an event like this one that I mentioned, or the Parkland Youth Town Hall that we had, or really any event needs to be vetted through this group so that we as a congregation will be prepared and safe for whatever we do. And just to let you know, Steve Cooper is our DRE is part of this team. I'm going to get back to Tillich now. The final form of universal anxiety that Tillich talks about is emptiness and meaninglessness. Most of us yearn for a sense that our lives mean something, that we have some purpose or focus in our lives. Most of us want some worthy goal that we're working toward. And when we don't have a meaningful goal, we can feel empty, a sense of meaninglessness in our lives. Despair, depression, anxiety can result. And we might find ourselves stuck because we don't find meaning or a purposeful goal in an endless loop of needing to make a decision about the future for our lives, but not being able to make a decision, but needing to on and on and on and on. Right now, I feel deeply unsure about how to proceed as your minister and as a social activist. As your minister, I am struggling with how to be authentic with you and meet the spiritual needs of this spiritually diverse community, as well as considering what direction my ministry will take over the next year and for the years to come. And as a social activist, I am struggling with so many things being broken because of Washington. So many people being harmed, our planet being harmed, and now a Supreme Court that is likely to overturn Roe versus Wade, or at the very least seriously weaken the ruling, taking away the right to safe abortions. Needless to say, I am overwhelmed. I am feeling empty and exhausted and flirting with meaninglessness, wondering about my purpose. I found myself at times having less energy and motivation to write, to preach, to come to church, to speak at rallies, to fill out witness slips. I have toughed it out and done these things, but I have to say there are times I would rather stay at home in my basement and watch some mindless television. But I will tell you this, I will not give up on my ministry at this church and on any church I serve. nor will I give up on my activism, even with these feelings dragging me down. My call is still strong. It is the external stresses that cause me doubt, and I know that. Tillich says these kinds of anxieties are normal and natural for all of us. That all of us struggle with anxiety about non-being, fate, guilt, condemnation, emptiness, and meaninglessness. And he offers some insights on effective ways to deal with these feelings. For him, it boils down to embracing the courage to be, to accept and affirm ourselves despite all that is going on within us and around us. Now, this self-acceptance can be achieved in a group, and Tillich believes that a group work is important in the equation. This church community is such a group that can provide that kind of acceptance and affirmation. But more importantly, he says the work must be done within oneself. As he says, the courage to be is the courage to accept oneself in spite of being unacceptable. When he says in spite of being unacceptable, he is talking both about how others treat you as they treat you somehow as unacceptable, or how your own feelings, something inside you says that you're unacceptable. And courage for him is about embracing self-affirmation, self-acceptance, regardless of circumstance. Even when you feel you have done something wrong, or hurt someone else, or you lack purpose or meaning, or when you feel yourself somehow afraid that you are no longer going to exist, or that fate has taken a turn that you cannot bear. Tillich wrote, "Grace strikes when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes when we walk through the dark valley of meaningless and empty life. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, and our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. It strikes us when year after year the longed-for perfection of life does not appear, when the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks through into our darkness, and it is as if a voice were saying, 'You are accepted.'" Grace. It might be a sticky term for some Unitarian Universalists. Certainly, there's a dictionary definition of grace being God granting some kind of personal kindness. However, I offer a different definition, and one that is not inconsistent with Tillich. See how it fits for you. Grace is an unsolicited loving kindness or positive regard. Let's see how that fits in Tillich's quote. An unsolicited loving kindness can strike us when we are in great pain and restlessness. At that moment, a wave of light breaks through into our darkness, and it is as if a voice were saying, "You are accepted." Have you ever felt that from another person? Someone say something to you, and it's like a light breaking through in your darkness, saying, "You are accepted." Have you ever done that for yourself? Have Have you ever felt that inside yourself? In your moment of darkness, something inside you rises up and says, you are accepted. You are loved. You are affirmed just as you are. Isn't that a lovely thought? I think some of us may have experienced that. I know I have experienced that. And that's what we're here to do as Unitarian Universalists, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person here, to accept and affirm worth and dignity so that we can help each other break through that dark time and to model for each other how to do that for ourselves as well. That doesn't mean that we stop striving to do our best or to live a life that is worthwhile. It's not meaning that we stop trying to harm other people. Our life will eventually end. But in the meantime, we need to still affirm and accept ourselves as having worth and dignity and deserving what is good in life. Tillich's phrase for that he uses is being rooted in the God who appears when the God of traditional religion has disappeared in anxiety or doubt. Now that's the basis of what Tillich has to say in his book. And it has, in many ways, helped me in my life. But as I reflect on it today, something's missing for me. I see the value in knowing that I can move from pain to health, from feeling meaninglessness to feeling meaningful. But in my personal theology, I believe there is a potential for something more. Tillich gives me the hope that I can get through a difficult situation with my own self-affirmation and with the affirmation of those who love and care about me. The thing that's missing from Tillich, at least for me, is the idea of transformation. Becoming something new through enduring the pain I am suffering. Not too long ago, a week maybe, Martha, seeing me go through some of the struggles I'm having with church and the administration in Washington, recently read me the following quote from Robert Bly's book, Iron John. And I remembered many years ago, some of you men here might have been part of it, that I did some work with men's groups and men's retreats called the Mythopoetic Men's Movement. But this quote I'm going to read from Bly is more than just about a men's movement. I feel its premise can relate to any person. Bly writes, "Where a man's wound is, that is where his genius is. Wherever the wound appears in our psyches, whether from an alcoholic father, a shaming mother, a shaming father, an abusing mother, whether it stems from isolation, disability, or disease, that is precisely the place from which we will be given a major gift, a gift we can share in community." I don't know if you're familiar with the terms wounded healer or wounded or flawed hero. For the healer to heal, for the hero to succeed, they need the wound or the flaw. The wound is necessary for the transformation to occur, for them to be able to offer something back to the community. The wound for me right now is my ministry, the meaning of it, the future of it, and the worth of it. And then last week something happened. On a monthly basis, I check in with my spiritual director. And my spiritual director told me to think about a chick. Isn't that a lovely little chick? Bright and cheery. But she wasn't talking about this chick right now. She wanted me to think about the chick from an unhatched chick's point of view. To put myself in the egg before the chick breaks out. Think about that for a moment. The chick's in there. It's eaten all its food that the egg contained. It's starving, unable to move due to the restrictions of size. The egg is not changed in size, but the little chick inside has grown considerably. It's probably panicked, suffocating, afraid, probably feeling like it's going to die in some constrained space. Desperate. It fights to break out of the egg. It's exhausted and starving, panicked, using every last bit of its energy, and finally breaks free. Transformed and ready to meet the world. That's how I feel. Perhaps this community feels the same. I know many people in our country feel like they're in the egg. I don't know what life will be like outside the egg, what I will be like, what direction my ministry will take, what impact the new me I will have on others, and I cannot know. I'm still inside the egg. I'm struggling with feelings, trying to accept who I am right now. I'm trying to find the courage to be at this moment. But I have hope. Hope that I will break out of this egg. I've done it before. I've navigated successful change before. When I was a psychotherapist and the call to ministry came, I couldn't sleep for days, I couldn't eat. I was in the darkness of the egg. I didn't know what would happen at the end of that dark time, if I would get out of it, what would happen when I got out of it, who would I be when I emerged. Today, while the anxieties of meaninglessness, purposelessness, guilt, condemnation, fate, and non-being persist, I know I will get through them. I listen for affirmations from those who love me. I give myself affirmations within, and I wait. Slowly eating away at the sustenance available to me right now, knowing that there will be a time when I must change, that I must break out of the egg. I know I will be transformed as I continue this journey. I just don't know what I'll be transformed into or what future circumstances will be. Today, I am embracing that journey to find its many blessings and gifts and learnings. Today, Tillich's words give me hope because I know that by holding on to the God when God disappears and the anxiety of doubt, I will make it. I will make it to, well, I really don't know what. But I can tell you, I am now ready for it.
There's no way to avoid an abrupt transition, but we are moving forward. Today's loose plate collection will be given to the Boys and Girls Club of America. If you wish to write a check to Boys and Girls Club of America, please write the check to DUUC with the Boys and Girls Club of America in the memo line. Laurel Herman will now step forward and tell us about this organization. Laurel?
My name's Laurel. I'm part of this church's public ministry committee, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club of Naperville. For 115 years, Boys and Girls Club has been helping millions of children reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. Our area alone serves 4,000 different members, so chances are that you know someone who is big, or you know someone who benefited from being a little. Today, you can help our church donate to this honorable organization. Thank you for giving generously.
This morning's offering will now be given and received.
Nicely. And now we will extinguish our chalice, but let us carry its flame in our hearts, reminding us to reflect on our first and fourth principle, that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and that we are all on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. We're going to sing a song we haven't sung before, but it's really good, and it's about the summer, and we've got to sing it. It's in the gray hymnal, number 66, When the Summer Sun is Shining. also from Tillich. Joy is the emotional expression of the courageous yes to one's own true being. So I invite you as you go forth from this time to go with joy in your heart, saying a courageous yes to that which lies deep within you, your true being. Now I invite you to turn around and greet one another. Let us share the love of this community with one another.